Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's Brian and Jim here of Drink a Beer and Play a Game, and today we are going to be checking out Metal Hellsinger.
Yes, and this comes to us as a Patreon review request from our buddy Todd, aka Snarkcast. And yeah, it's a new take on the classic Doom formula, so
Yeah.
once again, thank you for the support, and let's check this game out.
Cheers.
Originally released in September of 2022, this was developed by The Outsiders and published by Funcom. It originally came out on Windows, the PlayStation 5, and the Xbox series of consoles, and then was later ported to the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. So you play as the Unknown. She's a demon creature. She was kicked out of somewhere, and the Red Judge, who's basically the devil, stole her voice, and you work with a talking skeleton head named Paz to try and get her voice back, and they get revenge. Classic shit.
Some would say it's a metal love story.
Some would.
You tell me.
Is that the tagline?
You tell me.
I don't know. I should have done more research.
Damn it, Jim!
But, yeah, so this takes the classic, or not the classic, the newer Dooms, and adds a gimmick with rhythm-based actions. So, is it just a gimmick, or does it turn into a good game? Let's check it out.
The graphics. Well, like we say about most new games, it looks beautiful. And Jim, he played it on the PS5. I played it on my PC through Xbox Game Pass. So obviously we're using the latest gen shit. And just look at this game. The landscapes, they all look really well done. The character designs are great, the amount of gore. And what impresses us the most is just how much can be on the screen at one time. Because there's explosions going on. There's things shooting stuff at you. And especially when you get to some of these bosses, it's almost like a bullet hell first-person shooter. But there is one problem. After about the second or third level, everything starts to get a little samey. Yes, they do change up the environments, like from snow to fire to an abandoned city, but all the levels kind of feel the same over and over again, and you only have so many enemies you go against, and even then, you'll just get variants of the same enemy with maybe they have flaming swords or just a little bit of a different hue to them that designate their different powers. So it doesn't offer a ton, but what is here does look good, and I was a sucker for all the cutscenes. Those hand-drawn little depictions of hell, I loved it. And honestly, it's a game I really appreciate the detail they did put in here. So when it comes to score, I gave it an 8. Jim gave it a 7. When it comes to beer, I'm going to add 2 beers just because this will be a reoccurring complaint. I wish the game was just a little bit longer.
The sound. Alright, well, let's just get the music out of the way because that's the biggest draw of the game. So, this game kind of has the gimmick where the better you do, the more filled out the music tracks are. So, if you want to hear the actual music in all of its glory, you better get that max multiplier. That also tends to be a problem with the music because until you get really, really good at the game, you're just going to be hearing the different pieces of the music until you kind of build up on it. So, for a lot of the time, you're just going to be hearing like the basic beat. But the music, when it does kick in, it's awesome. And one thing I have to give the devs credit for is they made it so people could stream it and they could play it. Because they made original tracks and they brought in guest vocalists all the time. And they brought in some pretty big names. Like, you have the singers from like Trivium and Lamb of God and Surge from System of a Down. Shit like that. So it's really cool to just hear all these kind of familiar voices if you're a fan of metal. And then there's the fact that it's also smart that they wrote their own music for it because they could build the pieces of the music tracks around doing better in the song. So it's kind of ingenious that way. The sound effects are perfectly fine. Like, they're good. They're nothing special, explosions, demon grunts, stuff like that. Not exactly varied, but it's good. The voice acting in the game, you really only get 2 voice actors, and they both do a really good job. So speaking of going all out for guests, like I said, you only have 2 voice actors in this game, but you get Troy Baker as Paz and Jennifer Hale as the Red Judge. And they both kill it. Like, they do great jobs. Troy does his best Sam Elliott and the Big Lebowski impression to do the narration, and Brian loved that, and that kind of annoyed the shit out of me. I don't know why. It just did. Maybe because I'm not in love with the movie. Kill me. But it's just like, I see what you're doing, but yeah.
Jim, is it just because you hate fun?
Maybe I do, Brian. Maybe I do. But still, the performances are fantastic. So, yeah, with all that being said, Brian gave it a 9 and I gave it an 8. Like, it's really well done. I just wish I was getting off at the game, I guess, to have heard the songs in all their glory more. And when it comes to beer, I'll just give it 1 beer for not being able to hear the full music tracks all that much.
The control. Well, ironically enough, as Jim spoke about the sound, he was also kind of talking about the control. As he mentioned, this is a rhythm-based game, and yes, you are in charge of moving your character around, and you have the ability to double jump and dash, and you are going to really have to get used to that. But the main crux of this game is keeping the beat, and you have a few different weapons, and Jim will get into that, but you can either do this visually or by listening. And don't make the mistake I did when you have to calibrate this game. Don't think it's like a screen adjustment or other settings you kind of take for granted. Take the time and calibrate, because if your latency is off, your beat timing is going to be off, and you are going to die a whole lot. When I first played this, I kind of let the latency go a little too crazy, and I was off by so much. I had to get it down to about like 10 milliseconds for it to finally work well for me. Once it does, as I said, there is a kind of caveat here. If you're someone who's not good at keeping beat, this game will be a friggin' nightmare for you. But as Jim said, once the songs start layering on top of each other, every level starts off with the same basic drum line. That gets your beat started, and then they build and build with the instruments, and depending on which weapon you have, it's going to be easier or harder to keep the beat. That being said, things can knock you off beat from getting hit or missing the tune too many times, so the control is really about getting used to the music. It's not so much of an input issue because you really control that with your latency, so you really shouldn't have a problem there. That being said, it is very basic everything else, your movement and your dashes. You're going to be moving all over your controller, but at the end of the day, Jim and I both felt it was really smooth. So when it comes to scores, we're both going to give it 8s. Even with your latency adjusted, it could sometimes feel like the control was a little off, whether you were like Jim trying to keep beat by ear, or if you're going visually. So that could throw you off, so we couldn't quite give it perfect. But when it comes to beer, I'm going to limit you to 1, because you're going to need all your senses when playing this game.
The gameplay. Well, we already mentioned this, and if you've played any of the new Dooms, either 2016 or Eternal, you kind of know what to expect with this game. You're a demon, you're jumping around, fast-moving action, killing other demons. So, kind of been there, done that. Like we said so many times throughout this video already, it's really all based around the beat and the rhythm. And to piggyback off Brian's point, my God, did I struggle with this. Like, because I just kept trying to do it from ear, and I don't know if it was like a combination of the latency. I played on the PS5, and the DualSense doesn't have the most accurate triggers in the world, in my experience. And I don't know, man, I was just having trouble with this shit. But when I was going, it was going well. But let's go past that basic part of the gameplay that we talked about, and just go into, like, a first-person shooter is basically as cool as its weapons are, and that's where this game kind of falls short in a lot of ways, because you only get 6 of them. You start off with the sword and with the Paz head, and the Paz head's cool because it's very low damage, but it's a good way to build up your combos, basically. But then you eventually get a shotgun, a pair of pistols, which are the best weapon in the game. Like, you will always be maining these pistols. But then there's also a lance that has more of an area of damage effect, and claw boomerang things that you're not going to use them. They're probably the least useful weapons in the game. Every weapon has a special attack that you build up by having a number of kills and keeping the beat at a certain amount of time. And they have really cool stuff, like they can freeze enemies in place, suck enemies into like a gravity ball, or just have like a separate avatar view there to keep shooting at other enemies. So that's always fun to play around with. And they come in clutch during boss fights. Boss fights are kind of weird because there's one at the end of every level, but they all have the same look. Yeah, so they're all aspects of the Red Judge. That's how they get around the, I'll be honest, it's just kind of the laziness of the boss design. But I guess the enemy different patterns are different enough to differentiate. It doesn't differentiate them. You're just dodging bullets and attacking when you can. You also have these things called sigils, which are different abilities that can enhance you. So it can make your combos build up faster. It can make your combos go away slower. You can get some free misses and not be penalized. All different kinds of stuff. And they're cool. And you unlock them by doing these things called torments. And you get torments by how well you perform in the levels. So the better you do in the levels, you can unlock up to 3 torments per level. Go back, and they're all basically just challenges. And they are not easy. They are not easy at all. Even the early ones, you'll have to do a couple times to really start to get them down. That's a way to come back to the game, to go back and try and get those different torments. And there is online leaderboards, which is cool, so you can always score chase. And the best way to do well, besides your combo, is by not dying. So depending on the difficulty you choose, you get a certain number of resurrections per level. So on normal, you get like 3 resurrects. And if you run out of resurrects, you're done. You have to restart the level from scratch. Now, during my play of the game, I played on normal, and I never had to use a full out die in a level and restart it, except for the last goddamn level. And that's also the longest level, and I had to redo it again and again and again and again and again because the goddamn final boss has like 6 forms. That was delightful. You can actually check your stats for every single stage, too, for your combos, specials you kept up, stuff like that, and how long you spent in each one. So normal levels take you, 20 minutes to a half hour to beat. But I looked at the last level, and I spent 2.5 hours there. So, yeah, that took some time. But yeah, there's actually not that much to say about the game. It's Doom Eternal with a rhythm mechanic, and depending on how well your latency is set up, which you listen to Brian, reset every time you start. Depending on how well it is, you kind of know what to expect. But it's still a cool concept. So we both gave it 7s. And when it comes to beer, I'm just going to add 2 beers. One for the lack of weapon selection, and one for, just the extremely samey bosses.
The originality I can keep kind of short because we've said it multiple times. It's a Doom clone with rhythm mechanics. Now granted, there have been plenty of other rhythm games, but we actually gave this one points because, to our knowledge, there aren't many first-person shooter rhythm games, if there's any. And honestly, even if there are, this one just mixed so many cool things together between what Jim mentioned. Having the unique soundtrack for here was so nice. It was a breath of fresh air because they could have just went the route of buying, metal songs we all know, but they added that little extra effort and we appreciated it. As Jim pointed out, everything else is just a little too samey. Those torments, we've seen things like that before, sigils as powers, and even the weapons, there was nothing that unique about it. So with all that being said, we could only give it 4s. It's not the most unique game in the world, but it does take some cool concepts, meld them together, and give you an experience that you should really try out. So when it comes to beer, I'm not even going to add any because honestly, there's so many Doom clones out there, and this is probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, replayability I can keep short because it's single player only. As far as I know, there aren't any different endings. And the replayability is going to come from the 3 difficulty settings and really just from the score chasing. Like we said, the sigils and the torments, they take a lot of retries. So if you like the game and want to keep getting them, then yeah, you can go back and do that because the better sigils you have, the better score chasing chance you have. Yeah, and the sigils don't even really change how you play the game. They just make it easier to build higher points. So can't even give it that much there. So we both gave it 5s. It's really all about that score chasing and getting the abilities to be better at score chasing. And when it comes to beer, I'll just add 1 beer because I don't know how you would have done it, but some kind of multiplayer would be nice. Even just like an arena you run around and fight each other in.
All right, so overall, this was a weird one. I actually had a ton of fun playing it, but being unbiased and really looking at it, it was lacking a lot of content. As Jim said, each level, 20, 30 minutes tops. I think it took me about 5.5 hours to get through this game total. So it's one of those deals where it's like, man, it's already over. I'm not really going to go back and score chase it, even though I do love listening to those songs. It's a cool concept. I hope they make a second one, and they kind of maybe led you to believe that could happen.
Yeah.
And if they do, just make it much longer. That would be my only thing, and maybe give a little bit better variety because so far every person I've spoke to, you're going to use those dual pistols. As soon as you get them, you don't need to use anything else. Sure, you can try and mix it up, but honestly, those are the best weapons in the game by far.
Yeah, they just suck against the shield guys. Goddamn shield guys are assholes.
They are the most annoying.
Yeah. But, man, this is a game I wanted to like so much more than I did. Like, I don't know if it was the controller or, I'm playing on an old-ass TV, so the latency was always a problem. But, man, it just never looked like the beat matched up with what was going on in my head with what I heard. So it's either, I had to just concentrate on that and fight what's in my head for trying to keep the beat, or I just got lucky for a while and was able to keep the combo going. Drove me friggin' nuts. So, and actually, what do you call it? I actually think time-wise, for the amount of time I put in, it was the perfect amount for me, because I didn't leave me wanting more. So I don't know. I don't think it has a good heart behind it. It's got good intentions, and depending on your setup, you might absolutely love it and have no problems with playing it and become a big time score chaser.
Yeah,
me, it's one I'm never gonna go back to.
Yeah. So when it comes to scores, we both gave it 7s. Definitely really enjoyed it, but it's not the all-time great. So when we combine all of our scores together, it comes out to a 7.2. It's kind of right on the money with how we feel about the game. And like I said, I think that's a fair score. This won't knock your socks off, but if you're someone who loves the Doom games and want to try a spin on it, we'd highly recommend it. And if you're someone who likes rhythm games and maybe you're tired of just, the few that are out there, this could be good for you too.
Yeah, or if you're just a metalhead and you want some new banger tracks, you got that here.
Yeah. So Todd, thank you once again. Another great suggestion. And cheers, bud.
Cheers.
When it comes to beer pairing, I'm going to go with the Great Lakes Brewing Company's Dank Demon Imperial IPA. This is an 8% Imperial IPA that packs a ton of flavor. And just look at this can. You know it was meant for a game like this. So grab a couple cans and enjoy yourself. But don't get too drunk, because you're really going to need to stick to that rhythm. And remember to drink your beers and play your games responsibly.